Thank you. We are now moving to a new and interesting segment where we will be taken to two, again, additional new regions in the world. And we have a very exciting discussion upcoming, and it's not just because we do have a small surprise in the next 30 minutes at the end. I'm very pleased to introduce to you Dr. Gjoko Muratovski, an award-winning designer, researcher, and innovation consultant working with a wide range of universities, Fortune 500 companies, NGOs, and various governments from around the world. Throughout his career, he has held numerous leadership and high-profile appointments at various academic and professional institutions. He also served as a member of various thought-leading organizations such as Forbes Council's Stanford Institute for Innovation in Developing Economies, Oxford Digital Leaders Network, and the Yale Higher Education Leadership Summit. Gjoko is currently joining us from Melbourne, where it is quite late in the evening. And he's joined by Eric Quint, who in his role as the first Chief Brand and Design Officer at 3M was at the helm to scale brand and design across the global enterprise. Eric brings over 20 years of international executive design leadership experience and is a practitioner of design thinking as a mindset for collaboration and transformation across multiple levels of an organization to drive progress. Eric is a frequent keynote speaker and guest lecturer about design leadership, innovation, and brand expertise. He has co-authored a book for the Stanford University Press titled Design Leadership Ignited, describing how to embrace the complexities of design leadership to elevate design at scale. We're very excited for this conversation. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Natalie, for your introduction.
Gjoko, I believe your microphone is muted.
Right. Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you so much for having us, Natalie.
Thank you.
Hey, Eric. Good to see you again.
Gjoko. Yeah, good to see you. So let's talk design leadership.
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks, Eric, for being my guest this evening, and I was very much looking forward to our conversation. So let's begin. You are an excellent design leader with tremendous professional experience in the field, and you've also just finished a book on design leadership. So how would you define what is a design leader?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question also in relation to what is any other leader in any other fields. But I would say a design leader is inspiring, enabling, and connecting creativity and design to its stakeholders to drive meaningful, progress. And I say here stakeholders because you can be a design leader in a company, but also in a government or in a community or in a non-profit. So I think that is important to emphasize. And if you think about the inspiring part, I think this is very much about showing the way and creating a kind of a lighthouse and set a kind of vision for the team and for the company, if it is in a company. It is also about the enabling to set the conditions for the team to flourish, because a design leader is important to help to set the right conditions here. And then the connecting part is, I would say, the challenges that we have at hand nowadays are so complex that you can't do it from within one function or from even within one organization anymore. So collaboration and connecting the dots is extremely important. And so the design leader's task is to do that.
Absolutely. Design leadership is a relatively new phenomenon, especially in the corporate sector. Traditionally, designers rarely have positions on that level. They were rarely given that opportunity to lead on an executive level. Now, what I'm curious about from your perspective, what does it take for a designer to emerge as a leader in the corporate sector? You can also respond on this from your personal experience, if you like, as well.
Yeah, so my personal experience is that I think a design leader should lead and own and manage the capability of creativity and design in a large organization. If you talk about a corporation, you always talk about high complexity in terms of number of businesses, number of countries where there is operation, and the size of the company. And I think that leader is managing and owning that capability mainly to contribute to enhance innovation and advance the brand experience. And I think the design leader is responsible, in my opinion, to put design at the heart of the organization. And that means that you have to create organizationally the tissue of in the organization to integrate design. So that means you need to agree and define a kind of a governance of how design is operating. You need to make sure that you have the best quality creative leadership in your team. And of course, talent management is an important role here. But also operationally, you have accountabilities, and you need to drive efficiency and design excellence in your organization. And as a leader, you are the responsible person to do so. And then let's not forget about the culture, the design culture, where you create a value system for your design team that is a kind of a roadmap for them how to navigate. And also diversity and inclusion is a very important topic there as well. So these are a bit of the topics that you put at heart in a company. And I would say, to summarize, a design leader is not involved in designing things or products or services at all. They have the best talent hired to do so. But I think a design leader is mainly there to design the function of design, to design the capability of design within the organization. And I think you need to inspire and lead by example. And one of the roles that I like the most, which I talk a lot about, is being a bit of a corporate rebel, although with a purpose. But it is asking these what-if questions and why, because in big organizations they have a tendency to do things like they have done for decades, and I think it's good to open up to new ventures.
I love that. There's so many variables, of course, that need to be taken into consideration in such a role. As you mentioned, you outlined quite a few of them. What would you say is the biggest challenge that design leaders typically encounter in their day-to-day work? Yeah. What has been the biggest challenge for you personally?
Well, for sure, there's a few things there. One is that the complexities are increasing in general. And there's a faster pace of changes. The changes are more systemic, so not easy to solve from within one single activity. And collaboration is more and more important. So that means you need to do it together, teamwork. While we can talk later about that, in education, maybe students are still educated to become the masters of design. But I remember from my own practice that when we got interns, the one and only thing that we want them to take away was about how to collaborate in bigger teams and learn to speak and understand the language of all the other disciplines around the table. And so in the book that Natalie already introduced briefly, we talk about 18 dualities that a design leader has to challenge and has to master. Very often these dualities are opposing dualities, and you can easily be distracted as a design leader from all of these things, and that means that you will be not so effective. And so in the book, we write a lot about those dualities. And to give you a few examples, it is you focus on the short term versus the long term, which means tactical versus strategy. How are you leading your team and where do you put your efforts? Or, as a design leader, you are there to push the boundaries at one side. But at the other hand, you are responsible to adhere to the alignment and the structures and the policies of the company as well. And so there's many of these dualities that are part of your day-to-day challenges.
What would you say are the most important traits and skills that a design leader should have?
Well, I made a post in relation to our conversation and talking about design leadership in general and what it is all about. And I say, design leadership is a kind of an act of empathy to collaborate, and you need to do that across many stakeholders. It is the imagination to envision the future, which I think is a role of a design leader and a design team as well. And the resilience you need to have to navigate the complexities that we just discussed. And I think it is important that as a design leader, you are there to make sure that empathy is an important thing. And I made a few times a statement here by saying, designers are very well known and recognize their empathy that they have to get under the skin of customers to come up with the best solutions for them. But I would say if designers would use a bit of that empathy to connect better to their partners in the company in different functions, design would be much more successful. So I think empathy can be used on different levels.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's a quite interesting thing discussing these topics from the positions where we both sit, because I have been in leadership positions from an academic side of things, and you have been in leadership positions from an industry side of things, and it's interesting just exploring that meeting point and how our views come together when seen from these both perspectives, the two sides of the same coin. So
I have a question for you about that.
Sure.
So if you think about leadership, I have been through many leadership courses in all kind of shapes and forms. And the interesting discussion is always, are you born as a leader or can you learn about leadership? And the same question I have to you in terms of empathy. If you think about your students, can you learn empathy and being empathetic to your students, and how would you do that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. But let me also very quickly reflect on what you just said. Can you be born as a leader? Actually, no, I don't think you can. I don't think anybody can be born as a leader. Leaders are made, and they're typically self-made, and they're made on the basis of the circumstances in which they find themselves and the obstacles they have to overcome. So leaders have to naturally emerge, and you're not born with that trait. It is how you react in a given situation, and there are different types of leadership, of course, and different styles of leadership, and it is some leadership traits and some leadership styles are more suitable in some situations, but can be disastrous in others. And this is where I think that how some leaders emerge in some situations, and in other situations they fail. But to also reflect on the empathy.
To add to your point, situational leadership is extremely important in all of the complexities that we just discussed.
Yes. And for designers has been a very interesting evolution, because designers have not been traditionally placed in such situations, so they had to emerge as leaders. As you know, these type of roles are still not so common, so you have to assert yourself in a leader in an environment that doesn't necessarily recognize designers as leaders. And this has been a very big challenge for our discipline. And I think you have been one of the trailblazers in that regard, which is why for me it's so great having this conversation with you. But you also pointed a very interesting another question on the empathy. Empathy is one of those big traits that designers have. And is this something that we can teach to students? Well, I have to say, let me first say this. I think that most designers confuse empathy with sympathy. And sympathy is to understand what someone feels. Empathy is to project your imagination so you actually feel what the other person is feeling. And being empathetic means to put yourself in the other person's place. You can learn sympathy by conducting basic research. Anyone can learn how to be sympathetic without ever leaving the studio or the classroom. But to learn empathy, you will need to go in the real world and engage in a co-design process with your stakeholders. You cannot achieve this by inventing personas, which many designers actually use personas as shortcuts, and they think the job is done. Actually, you absolutely cannot do that. I never personally use personas in my work. I always use real people. And I do believe that it is only by fieldwork research and direct stakeholder engagement that you can become empathetic. So this is important because it is the only true empathy that we can design authentic and meaningful solutions for real persons. And it is for this purpose that every time I create a design program, an educational design program, I make sure that it creates a simulation of a real world environment as close as possible. And I incorporate fieldwork aspects into that, because the students, they can only learn these things by actively engaging with it, not by conducting imaginary projects. So this is a big difference in terms of how I do stuff.
Yeah, I always refer to empathy as the unseen and the unspoken. And so,
yes.
So this is what you have to have a sense for to pick up in order then to either better collaborate or come up with better solutions. So you talked about imagination here, and you are an academic researcher by heart. So one of the dilemmas that design leaders also have is, researching and setting up research to understand the now, but also the future. And so how does imagination come to play in the balancing act of doing research for the future versus doing research for the now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I tend to balance both type of, I also work for companies, and I conduct applied research, which informs the design outcomes in the real world, but I also do other type of more academic research, also known as basic research, which is about posing bigger questions. I think one of the things is, in both cases, I like to be informed by real world situations. I really don't like discussing design on an abstract level, as many design researchers do, because for me, design is something that is very applied, that it's like studying to be a surgeon without ever going to an operating room. Like for me, that is kind of, if we only learn about design on an abstract level, we end up with that type of situation, and that's not helpful to anyone. So I often describe design as a human-centric discipline that acts as the mirror of society. In many ways, design is a reflection of our understanding of the world in which we live in. This reflection is not really an image of how things are, but how we would like them to be. And I think that this is a very important aspect that design brings into the mix. And I strongly believe that to be a good designer, you need to be a great visionary. As designers, is it our job to envision a better world, regardless of how big or small the project we are working on is. And I can say that by looking in the past and reflecting on the present, we are often invited to project new images of the future that we would like to see. So this is why I often employ speculative design and strategic foresight in my work. And this is how I put imagination to play. Have you been applying like that speculative design typically in your work?
Yeah, so in a business context, it's very often about mitigating risks. And so I always say that if design needs to start to use their creativity and imagination to create probable futures. But these are scenarios only for talking points and drive future decision making in companies. And so if design is not doing it, it's not very likely that other functions are easy to pick up on this. Maybe strategy and maybe an R&D department. And therefore, I think future activities are driven in big organizations by strategy, R&D, and design, and of course also marketing. But in that capacity, you create scenarios for evaluation of finding out what are the probable future scenarios that you want to put on your roadmaps and on your ambitions.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of my professional work as a researcher sits on that level. And that's typically when you work with very large companies, with very large organizations that have a lot of potential impact, and they can be described as market leaders. The challenge is understanding what is your next move. And you're at that level when you're such a large company that you're leading, you're not following. So you need to chart an uncharted territory ahead of you. So creating this, yeah, sorry.
And the ones that are willing to take the responsibility about the future will probably create a future.
Yeah, that's exactly. So it's all about using this trend analysis and trend forecasting, strategic foresight to chart possible scenarios that a company may take forward. Now, you benchmark these scenarios with a number of things relevant to the company, and then you decide, okay, this is the future we choose to pursue. And I often say, when people say, but do we really need design research and so on? Do we really need research to do this type of things? And I say, yes, absolutely. And that is because research is, as you said, it's a form of risk reduction. We are trying to eliminate paths that we shouldn't take by conducting research. It's not doing research for the sake of doing research.
It's not about finding the truth, because nobody has a kind of fortune-telling capacity.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. It is about using your imagination to create those probable futures in order then to have a dialogue about what makes sense and what is meaningful and what not.
Yes.
And what I see is that in many big companies, they use their classical marketing research techniques and tools to do research going into the future. While we all know that if you want to research the future, you need to have completely different kind of approaches to design research.
Yeah, absolutely. And marketing research can very rarely, in a classical sense, I'm talking marketing research, can very rarely tell you what the future is, because marketing research tends to measure what people know now. Not that it doesn't measure the things like from empathy that you mentioned before, things that people cannot quite express yet, that they are not aware of yet. They can only measure things that people know. So a very basic example of that is the iPhone. If Steve Jobs was conducting marketing research about what kind of phone Apple should design, then the conversation would have probably been make the phone smaller as possible and the battery to last as long as possible, because that's what people were judging phones on at the time. So they would have ended up with another version of Nokia, and probably customization aspect of that will have been, but you can have it in different colors.
Yeah,
and but he conducted design research, and he was focusing on pain points, and they were looking in terms of unmet needs and looking at gaps in the market and doing what if scenarios, in the sense of what if we use this and this technology, how will the phone look like then, and so on. So the result is what we have right now, an entirely new product that has disrupted an extremely established industry. And you can't achieve that with marketing. Marketing is great for
evaluation of existing propositions.
Yes, it's for the innovation which is not groundbreaking innovation, not disruptive innovation, but innovation that is incremental.
Incremental.
So you can just tweak certain features, this and that, minor things. It will never lead you to a groundbreaking solution. Because if you ask people like, tell me what you think about a phone, they will say, well, maybe processor could be faster, maybe the screen could be brighter. They will not say, I need you to completely reimagine how I'm going to use my phone.
I think, Gjoko, that we are not thinking big enough here, because I hear a lot about user and human-centered research. But if we keep making what users want, I think we will not solve any of the systemic issues that we have on sustainability, mobility, health, education, the equity gap, and so on and so on. And I think design leaders need to start to think about moving from making things to making behavior and designing behavior. Because and I think that are the best innovations also, because I think the best innovations are the ones that have impacted the behavior of people, the way they connect with people through mobile phones, or the way they were mobile through cars, or and so on and so on. So the biggest innovations have had real impact on human behavior of people. And I think if I look to the United Ways and Nations sustainability goals, you know, they are so big and they are so systemic that if we are not going to work together with companies and educational institutes and governments and policymakers, we will not have any impact on sustainability and all the above.
Yes, and design should be transformational in that regard.
I always say the creativity and imagination, but also the human focus and collaborative mindsets of designers will be a kind of a protagonist and a catalyst to connect all stakeholders together and to lead the way. And I think with design thinking in the widest sense of the word, we have proven as design leaders and designers that the impact and progress that we can create can be pretty big. And so I see a healthy future there. So in relation to your students, is this what your students are dreaming of if they think about becoming the designers or maybe design leaders later?
Yes, I have to say that I see that very much coming forward in the new generation of design students, you know, that they like to think big and they like to see themselves as people that can eventually change the world. As cliche as that may sound, you know, but they do believe in big things. They believe in sustainability. They believe in equal human rights. They believe in improving the world in any way they can, and they would like to see meaning in their work. They like to be able to have transformational effect wherever they are, whether they're in a small company, whether they're in a large company.
Yeah, so working to drive the financial and economic growth of a company only is not enough nowadays anymore. You also have to think about the social impact, the community impact, and all the things that that company can do, because in many cases they have huge networks, they have capital that they can invest, they have human capital as well, and they are in a very good position to move the needle. I'm looking forward to that next generation of design leaders that you guys are educating to dream bigger and take up that lead.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I mean, you know, like design is transformative when it plays a corrective function in business and society. And designers who work in this way often highlight mistakes and faults and propose new solutions that aspire to improve things in some ways. And this is by no means an easy task. In fact, it's a very much confronting task. Even when people in organizations know that they need to change, they are not always prepared to make the change. And this is why I think you were also referring to the aspect of resilience, because design leaders must have resilience in order to drive this progress. And this is because resilience allows us to maintain the integrity of our process if we truly believe in these values. So this is where true design leadership is needed the most, I think.
Yeah, and actually, if designers propose new propositions to their stakeholders and they feel upfront comfortable with it, probably the change they propose is not big enough.
Yes. So typically good designers, good design leaders, they create frictions that they need to drive through.
and drive progress by that.
Because change can be painful sometimes, but it's good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, we are right on spot with our session today. So this was great. Very quick conversation.
Yes, thank
but
you.
Enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, me too. Thank you
so
Gjoko,
much
for the nice questions.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Information on Eric's book is also on our Miro board. If you haven't had an opportunity to check it out, please do. You can add to our growing number of leadership resources there. Thank you to Eric and his publishers in the US and the UK for offering this discount. I hope that you found the session enlightening and consider picking up a copy. Thank you, Gjoko, for your contribution as moderator as well today.